Hi everyone, it's Lynn. Listen, I was going to ask you a question just to, because I've been doing that lately, but someone asked me a great question, so I thought I'd answer it. So they asked me, do I press to the dark side or do I press my seams open? And honestly, I press to the dark side 90% of the time. Every once in a while, I press my seams open. And I know it's a huge controversy for people who press to the dark or press their seams open. So it's been bugging me for a while until I finally read a long arm quilter who's very adamant about why she pressed her seams open because it was better for her long arming. And I'm like, I'm a long arm quilter, and that didn't make sense to me until she said this in the comments. She said that if the long arm gets stuck on a seam, it can rip your quilt. And I went, now I understand. So why would you press your seams open? If you are having someone long arm your quilt that has a computer, which means they are not hand guiding the long arm, then they want the seams pressed open because they don't want anything to accidentally bump that needle when they're not watching, because they let those computers run while they're not watching the quilt every minute. That's what happens. And when they do that, your needle could get caught in one of those bulky seams and it could rip the quilt because the computer won't stop. So that's why you press your seams open. And because people like the aesthetic of it. Now, as a kind of traditional quilter, I have found that, and as a quilt appraiser, I have found that if I press it to the dark side, my seams are more stable. I get better points because I can lock those seams in while I'm sewing. And I custom quilt all my own quilt. So I think the answer is, it depends. Should you press your seams open or should you press to the dark? Depends on what you're doing. If you normally have a long arm quilter that uses a computer to quilt your quilt, you should probably press your seams open, because she's right. I understood that once she said that other part. I don't have a computer, so I don't use that aspect of it. So that's what you should probably do if you're doing that. Now, if you're not, and you're worried about the longevity of your quilt, and you don't want those seams to pop open as they're being washed and stuff like that, you probably want to press to the dark. So it's up to you. It depends on how you do quilting. I would say if you press your seams open as an aesthetic, yes, it's going to lay flatter. Yes, you have a more chance of those seams popping because it's only thread holding that together and it's being pulled from both sides. That being said, if you press your seams to the dark, you don't have that pull. So, and if you're custom quilting your own quilt or you're quilting your own quilt, you're going to be able to avoid those. And 9 times out of 10, really show quilts and all that kind of stuff, they are stitched in the ditch. And so if you have just thread there and you're stitching on that just thread in the ditch, you really have a chance of just ripping those seams open later because it's just thread that's holding it together. So you can tell I'm probably really much more, hey, press to the dark. And that's kind of my side that I'm on. But I can see the reasons why you would press it open. And every once in a while, I do press my seams open. If it's like a bunch of fabric coming to one point, it's easier to sew that together sometimes. But even then, I will tell you, 95% of the time, 90% of the time, I'm pressing my seams to the dark side. So anyway, I thought it was a really good question. And I did have to think about it for a few days to go, I wonder why. And then once I saw that long arm post that comment, I understood why, the logic behind it. Because I don't think people were pressing their seams open until the modern quilt movement came in. And I couldn't figure out why, but I realized that was about the same time that you saw the rise in computerized long arms. And that makes so much sense for those tools. And remember, they're tools. a computerized long arm compared to a hand-guided long arm. They're both the same tool. They need different things for them to work out best. So I think you could do either. I'm going to continue to press the dark, but you be you and you do what you need to do. But I would take those things into consideration depending upon how you are going to quilt the quilt. And I think that may be your major reason for doing it a certain way. If you are going to have something computer long-armed, they're going to turn on a computer and that's going to stitch all those stitches out for you. Or you're doing a pantograph. Could be the same thing. If someone is doing a pantograph because they're quilting from the back of the machine and they're not quilting right in front of it, so they cannot see where those bulky seams are, you're right, that's going to rip it as well. So those are the two things that I would take into consideration, whether you choose to press the seams open or press to the dark. So tell me what you all think, and we'll talk to you later.